editor of Midland Business Insider. I'll be your sort of, for the next half hour, 40 minutes or so, I'll be your sort of host, guide, MC, inquisitor-in-chief, however you wish to perceive it. Let me explain how this is going to work. In a moment, we'll get our panellists to introduce themselves, a little about themselves and a little about what they do. We'll then have a discussion. I've got some notes written down here. After that, we'll go to that dreadful thing called audience participation, roughly about 10 o'clock, where you get to fire questions. Our panel here will be amazed by the insights and the clarity of your questions. You will be astounded by their responses. Okay. So no pressure there.
No pressure.
So anyway, let's introduce ourselves very quickly.
Hi, I'm
A little more on what you do, as it were.
All right, okay. So basically, I'm Dr. Sonia Reynolds, and I'm the founder of Zephalinia Limited. And basically, I've invented a non-interlaced textile. So it removes the steps of traditional textile manufacturing using yarn. And we're pioneering that new technology.
That's amazing. Hi guys, I'm Ella. I head up sustainability and innovation at Selfridges. So I look after our route to net zero, our transition to circular business models, responsible sourcing, and we also have a really fun pillar called mindsets, which is all around behaviour change, and that is how you change customer, team member, and brand partner behaviour to be more sustainable.
Finally.
Hi everyone, Anna Bright, Chief Exec at Sustainability West Midlands. We're an independent, not-for-profit. We've been going 22 years now. We're a membership organisation. We've got about 200 cross-sector members, lots of them working on circular economy, and we also provide advice on a whole range of sustainability things, but circular economy included.
All right, well, I'm going to pick on you, if I can,
Okay.
to start off with. Well, somebody's got to get the ball rolling. Title of this is, How Do We Reach Circular Economy in the Next Century? Putting it bluntly, what is a circular economy? Because it's one of those phrases, if you're not careful, can mean anything to anybody. So how would you define what a circular economy is?
So, in a nutshell, it is keeping valuable resources or materials in circulation, in use. So, moving away from a system where we take a raw material, we use it in a product or delivering a service, and then it's disposed. It's making sure that all those really valuable resources are reused as far as possible. And I think a really good example of this is gold. So, we've probably all got some gold. Gold is forecast to run out as a raw material in about 20 years' time. Now, to mine a gram of gold takes a ton of excavation, but actually in 40 mobile phones, there's a gram of gold. So when you think about it like that, you know, the potential in those phones that we've all got sitting in our drawers at home to keep that resource in circulation, I think that's a really good example that sort of brings it to life a bit.
Okay. What do you understand by circular economy? I'm going to pick on you because I've got my notes here. It says, ask Ella about 45%.
Thank you. So Selfridges set a target back in 2020 that 45% of our transactions would come from circular products and services by 2030. So we have this fantastic document called the Circular Charter, which we're really hoping to share, where we look at the different models and products that we would count as being circular. So very similar to your point, it's all about keeping items in circulation for longer. But a really interesting thing that I think I spend a lot of my time thinking about is that element of how you decouple volume from growth. So as a business, how do you sustain yourself for the future and create amazing experiences for your customers without the consumption of new products? And that 45% is that real moonshot goal to try and inspire really fundamental change across the Selfridges business. You know, we really felt the need to be really, really ambitious to kind of outline the level of change that's going to be required. And crucially, just touching on why we chose transactions as opposed to something like revenue. We felt that transactions was much more symptomatic of actual behaviour change, because if we just had a big revenue target, we could go and sell a load of £300,000 second-hand Patek Philippe watches, and you could get there pretty easily, whereas it being transactions, I think, is much more representative of the proportion of your business that is hopefully going to make up in the future.
So a couple of things then, come see if I can say in a moment, is number one, that involves that thing of greenwashing. Hi, we set an easily attainable target and we can fudge the figures. But secondly, how do you actually go selling that? Because that's a huge. We're going to come to mindset later, I hope. But that's a big change from just sort of we sell more stuff by producing more stuff. That is a big change in mentality, isn't it?
Absolutely massive, and the concept of their circularity is, in terms of how we're selling that to our owners, to our teams, it's so intrinsically linked to customer loyalty and that kind of concept of your customer coming back to you. So the example I like to use is of a handbag. If we sell a handbag to a customer, they can come back and repair it. I will see them another time. We're going to have another transaction with them. That customer can sell their bag back to us, and I can reward them for it, and I can then sell that customer to somebody else and kind of keep that in the loop. And all of a sudden, we've got much deeper relationships, albeit you are measuring the value of that over a longer period of time. But I think shifting how we measure success, moving away from just a weekly, quarterly number, is really key.
Simon, coming to you, I mean, can you describe to a layperson like me, who gave up science by 16, let's be honest, what it is you actually do and how that works into the concepts of circular economy? The reason I ask you is because we've had one, we don't mind me saying generic case, one specific case, but yours is ultra specific, as if I might say. So explain what it does and why it fits into this concept of creating a circular economy.
Yes. Well, basically, the new technology is called FOIS, which is the acronym for fibre and yarn surface entanglement. So traditionally, textiles using yarn is created by an interlacing process, which is woven, or an interlooping process, which is knit. FOIS technology actually just entangles the surface on the fibre of yarn. So therefore, it's a layering process. And in that layering process, you can actually embed other types of yarn. And you can embed recycled yarn. And typically, recycled yarn is a lot weaker than yarn that is not recycled. So the fact that we can embed that in between two layers of yarn means that that helps with sustainability, and also, as I've mentioned, reducing the actual steps in the manufacturing process, again, helps with using less energy to actually manufacture.
Just out of curiosity, because let's come on to the idea of mindset now, if that's okay. But one thing I'm curious about that is, does that mean sustainability and recycling is often sort of associated with second-hand, second-rate, as it were? Does that overcome that? So basically, what you're creating is something new and as good as the original? Or
Yeah, that's exactly right. When you talk about culture, you do think of recycling, or, as you mentioned, second-hand is not as good. It's been used by someone before.
Pre-loved, yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly. But actually using it in this new way, it does create something totally new.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to come to this thing, actually, before coming to culture, let's put this into hard business cases, as it were, because I would argue most business organisations, if they're not careful, sustainability gets sort of stuck in a corner over there, you know. Tick must do, number 5th on the list of to do. If we come to you, Anna, how do you actually go about working with organisations, businesses, making a viable business case for sustainability? Not something this is you should do because it's right, but you should do because it makes it adds to the bottom line.
Yeah, so actually I think there's been a massive transition over perhaps the last 5 or 7 years, and I think, you know, the scenario you described there as sustainability is we ought to do that. I do think that has changed predominantly now. You know, when we're speaking to businesses, they're not saying, why do we need to do this? They're saying how, you know, we need help, we need support. So I do think that has changed fundamentally. In terms of how we get businesses to do more, I think it's understanding their particular drivers. For some it will be purely economic, for some it will be around business opportunities, you know, procurement and the requirement to demonstrate your sustainability credentials as part of that. For some it will be their role in the community. So the drivers are really, really different. You've got to understand what those are for that business and then tap into those to drive behaviour change across the whole business from the top to the bottom.
So, for example, you might have some organisations where the issue, let's say, is energy costs, for example. That's their driver. So you've got to do that. Or it might be a demanding customer like Ella who's demanding, we demand sustainability. Is that increasingly, you have to understand that initially?
Yeah, I mean, that is, I suppose, your very basic business case, isn't it? If you're looking to invest in some kind of technology to improve your sustainability, you want to know when you're going to get your return on investment, what the payback period is. But I think it's focusing on the co-benefits as well.
What do you mean by that?
So if you, for example, you're a business and you think, okay, we are going to invest in solar. Yes, you'll get your payback on that over a certain period, maybe 3 or 4 years, but you're also going to be more resilient to shocks in the energy system as well, so you're improving your business resilience. Another example, tree planting. Lots of organisations will do that for biodiversity reasons, but you're also going to improve local air quality. You're probably going to, if you do it right anyway, you might be able to mitigate your flood risk and so on. So there's often a whole suite of co-benefits around one action, and I think you can tap into that as well as that pure business case.
So I'm going to move on to Ella in a moment, but going to that, surely one of the challenges you've got there is, you're going about air quality, you're going about solar panels, is you're looking at a much longer payback period, which doesn't fit into the usual sort of, I've got to hit quarterly results.
I think if you can hit both, if you can say, okay, we've got the economic benefit here, but we've got all of these other co-benefits which we can sell to our stakeholders, whether they're our customers, our potential new recruits and so on. It's a really big holistic picture that we've got to understand and get across.
Okay. Coming to you, Ella, I mean, how do you go about that, making a business case for this, rather than sort of, I'm not suggesting you be greenwashing for a moment, but it's rather than sort of on the list of things we must do, it becomes a priority of the business and one which you can actually see a beneficial return.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like to your point, thinking really 360 and using data and thinking about what the KPIs are beyond just revenue. Obviously, I mentioned the example of the handbag, whereby you can double your top line revenue from a product over time by engaging in these circular models. But also things like, there's plenty of studies out there around how value-driven businesses have better retention. It's amazing for talent acquisition. We know that our customers expect this of us, so we have loads of customer surveys that we do regularly. The majority of our customers expect this from us. They expect us to do that work. They want us to be doing it. They want us to tell them how to engage in these different models and to make more sustainable choices. So there really is a complete business case, and we've kind of gone quite granular in terms of, we can say that if we have an organic white t-shirt and a non-organic white t-shirt, and that we've surfaced that to our customer, that I think it's about 70% of the cases the customer will choose the organic one. So, and there's amazing partners coming in now with all the legislation on traceability and provenance, etc., who embed widgets into websites and also bring even more data around what that does to your add to basket, customer like dwell times and all those sorts of things. So there really are a host of data points that you can take back, and how, deepening your customer relationships and starting with the customer is obviously always fantastic, but there are so many halo effects around that that just make it, I think, for a business so enticing to engage.
Well, so just carrying with that, because that sounds as though when you're making a business case for sustainability and circular economy within the company, you have to think beyond that quarterly loss and profits account. So for example, you've been talking about repeat customers, you've been talking about you talk about skills retention and so forth. Is that, do you have to push the metrics far further when you're making your reports about what you're achieving?
You definitely do, and it's about that storytelling as well. How you bring all of those pieces together, and also how you tie it back to that commercial, broader business strategy. I think Selfridges is very fortunate that we have a vision and purpose, which is about reinventing retail for a more sustainable future. So much of what we do very naturally ladders up to what we think we stand for as a business. But yeah, that business case, that building it, the telling the story, trying to get people to think longer term, and don't get me wrong, that's not easy. That takes a huge amount of engagement and persuading and repetition, iterating, etc. But a lot of those things are very difficult to ignore completely.
Come to you, Sonia. I mean, how does it work with you? Because you're selling it you've developed a quite unique product. How do you go about, I take it you're not going to manufacturing, but how do you actually go about convincing clients that you not just produce something that helps the profit and loss account, which helps their broader goals as a business, as it were?
Well, all of our contracts at the moment, the customer have actually come to us, they've actually approached us. And it's because of as you mentioned about compliance now,
Yeah.
there's a lot of compliance issues that companies have to adhere to. And also, with the new technology, we use sustainable materials, natural fibres. So obviously that means that it's biodegradable. So basically the new process ticks a lot of their boxes on what they're actually looking for. And another advantage of the technology is that it can create fabrics of the same circumference as a knit or woven, but at up to 50% of the actual weight.
So what benefits does that bring, just out of curiosity? So basically you produce this but half the weight?
That's woven. But yes, so obviously transport issues,
Right.
breathability, there's just lots of advantages.
That's what I mean about those
Yeah.
it's selling the wider benefits rather
Yeah.
than just the sheer profit loss account.
Yeah, exactly. So it's about being able, as I've mentioned, to meet the demands that are being placed on companies to be more sustainable, to have more of a circular economy. That's what our technology actually helps them fulfill.
Just go ahead, come out with something you said. How much of the work you do is driven by companies looking to meet compliance rather than economic a business case?
Quite a lot, unequivocally. So I think, it is trickling down, isn't it, that
Yeah.
need to report, to have a carbon plan, and I think that will only, trickle down further to affect smaller organisations. So yeah, it's definitely a driver.
Right, so basically I'd argue, forgive me for putting words in your mouth, you might as part of your job is convincing businesses you might as well make a benefit out of a necessity, as it were. You've got to do this. So rather than just grudgingly do it, why don't you embrace it, crack on with it, and get something more out of it?
Yeah, but I mean, there's a really good example. So we're working
please.
with a manufacturer in Coventry at the moment, and they came to us exactly that. Look, we know we need to be compliant around waste, our products, and so on. So that was the starting point. And we went in and we thought, okay, we've got quite a job to do here to sort of change the ethos across the organisation. We've been working with them about 6 months now, and honestly, the transformation is incredible. Every decision in the boardroom now is including discussions around sustainability in its widest sense. So they've gone from that ticking the box, as you referred to it earlier, yes, we're compliant and that's the basics, to really thinking about all of those wraparound areas as well. So that's where we try and add on to the basics, if you like.
Which comes to slides nicely to something I was going to raise next, is the importance of culture. Is number one, big on you out if I can. How do you actually, let me be real, I can imagine some organisations are full of people like me, middle-aged men, seeing it all, every time you raise sustainability you can see the arms crossed like that. Yeah, come on, this year's fad, just let me hit my targets. How do you go about changing a culture and a mindset within the business, rather than sort of people just doing the absolute bare minimum they have to basically to keep you quiet?
Yeah, absolutely. And that is so key, that embedding within your organisation. I think the number of conversations I have with other sustainability professionals, the kind of general consensus is a sustainability team and your own little unit and your own little sustainability cave on your own is really never going to move the needle. So how you embed that into every single person's role and, like say, and those top level decisions. So very early on, Selfridges included key sustainability goals on what we call our executive dashboard. So, and that is linked to the remuneration of the senior leadership team and the executive team. So there is a real impetus there for all of those leaders to come together to get us towards those goals every single year. And then last year we went one step further as we were redoing our development kind of tools and processes across the business to add a sustainability goal to everybody's development goals. So now every quarter everybody is required to set a sustainability goal, and it was a fantastic learning, if I'm being completely honest, and one where we really had to, I guess, pivot a little bit. So after the first year we sat down with our people teams and we had a look at what everyone was putting, and there was loads of, I'm gonna not buy plastic water bottles, and I'm gonna recycle more, and I'm gonna cycle to work. And don't get me wrong, all fantastic changes that I absolutely commend and encourage people to make, but none of which are helping us to move the company forward in what we're doing. And so this year we sort of went back to the drawing board a little bit, and actually my team mapped out across all of our sustainability pillars how every single team in the organisation laddered up to that and what everybody's impact was. And not everyone has an impact on every single one, but there are definitely multiple meaningful areas that every single team member can have an impact. And so then did a full roadshow at the beginning of this year, again with every single team, to make sure that all of our team members really understood the impact that they have. And then we spend an awful lot of our time with those key teams, such as our buying teams, for example, to really embed what we're doing within their processes, within their BAU. Because what we have learned is, business as usual, into just their everyday. So that we've learned, again, the hard way, that if we put something in that sits separately and that is additional, it kind of feeds that perception that sustainability is just yet another thing they're having to do. To your point, let me crack on with my targets. So how do we get that in a really seamless way that's also really efficient for them, so that you really win those hearts and minds?
I mean, how do you go about it changing? Is that part of your job? And secondly, how do you convince? So LSA, I can imagine if the leadership team and the board have got targets and they suddenly realise I don't get paid as much at the end of the year if I don't do this. How do you go about helping businesses pivot, but not just the leadership team? So you got the leadership team go rah, 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 but people on the factory floor, it just means nothing to them. How do you actually filter that down so it actually means something to them?
Yeah, so I think first of all, really understanding the organisation, how it works at that point in time, who does what, where the challenges are. Then I think data, we mentioned data earlier, really understanding where the challenges are and where you need to prioritise action. But I think the power of storytelling is really important. So I can guarantee whatever an organisation is thinking about when it comes to sustainability, somebody else will have tried that. So we can either share that positive story and the learning, or we can share, what went wrong and what we can learn from that. I also think there's nothing more powerful than looking at what competitors are doing. So if you can say, look, there's somebody else with a very similar product or service to yourself, and actually they are doing this, they're doing it well, it's been noticed within their supply chain, that can be a really powerful driver.
I really hadn't thought about that. Sort of, it's almost not exactly one-upmanship, but that's sort of the Joneses next door are doing this. In business terms, we need to do this as well.
Yeah.
I can see you nodding at this, Sonia.
How
How does it affect you? This sort of thing, the need to change culture. If you're slightly outside of the businesses you're supplying, you say they come to you. So obviously, there's a cultural change within them that's made them seek you out.
Yeah, so I think with all innovation, there's always a spark of interest. And so that's literally what we target. As soon as, they show the interest by coming to us, then that gives us the opportunity just to explain all of the benefits of utilising the way in which we manufacture textiles.
Yeah. The other thing is, how important is it to... Let me be a cynic for a moment, which is sort of profits and planet. It's a great thing, but the planet is what? 8,000 kilometres across, I think. What the hell can we do for as my small business in Smethwick achieve about this? What's I got to do is, how important is it to actually break it down to achievable goals. We're not going to save the world from Smethwick or Coventry, but we can make a contribution. And the reason I say that is how important is it to actually break down the initial steps into small achievable goals, easy to win targets, rather than sort of a big strategy like a moonshot where you think you're going to fail. I'm sorry to say it earlier,
fine.
where you think you're going to fail. I mean, how do you...
I think for smaller companies, it's good to have a sustainability audit. Just look at everything across the board. Look at the process, look at packaging, look at then post, how it's actually delivered. Recently, I sent out some samples and I really thought about, does each sample need to be in a separate package, or can it can be put in a way that's still attractive to look at, but then we're sending out something that's got a lot less packaging. So we just, as I've said, you just do a sustainability audit, just look at everything.
So you've actually apply this to yourself as well, rather than...
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, definitely.
Well, how are you going to break it down to sort of those... Again, I put myself in the position of a somebody working on the shop floor or whatever, or perhaps even the supply departments. How do you break it down so, click, I can achieve that, I can achieve that, I can achieve that, rather than sort of a big strategy, 2030 will be here-ish?
Absolutely. I do think having an idea of what you're aiming for is really important. So kind of very much stand by that long-term vision, because what we've seen with the targets that we've set is actually they've been really inspiring and they've been really motivating, because our team members or the industry have kind of gone, wow, these guys are really going after this. But those huge numbers are really scary. So how do you get that balance of someone disengaging because they're going to go, well, that's impossible, that's never going to happen, and working backwards from that into what those building blocks are? I think often in this space there is so much you can go after. If you think about all your different sustainability goals, the results that will come out of an audit, you could go after packaging, we can go after building, we can go after, we have loads of categories that we have goods for resale, not for resale. It's absolutely massive. Being really clear and specific on, as with everything, there is always an 80-20 rule. So one of the things that we've done this year is actually, if I think about all the goals and targets we had last year versus the ones we have this year, technically we have fewer. It absolutely doesn't mean we're doing less. We've just done a bit of an audit of our own audit and gone, what are the things that are really going to move the needle, that are where we really want everyone to get behind? So I think simplifying, being really specific and thinking of those areas that are going to have the most impact, rather than trying to do hundreds and hundreds of little things that then no one can then really follow you. So I think, making it easy for people to get behind. Think about what that 80-20 rule is, and you're also going to have to iterate on that plan. You can set out a 5-year plan, things are going to change, and so accepting in this space that legislation is coming in, that rising floor is coming in faster and faster, you're going to have to pivot for loads of different reasons. And I think sustainability teams are probably some of the most resilient across the board. And
is that because you have to take the brickbats that are thrown at you?
Well, that too. But you've got to be prepared, I guess, for anything. And it's lots of change. It's constant change. It's constant adaptation. And rolling with the punches, I think, is a good analogy.
Okay. How about Anna? How do you actually go about sort of convincing businesses? Yes, that I was talking about some moments ago, having those big targets are important because they inspire, but having those small, easy wins, say, look, this actually is doable if you break it down to bite-sized chunks.
Yeah, so I think the points that have already been made around the importance of having a strategy, absolutely, but that doesn't have to be a daunting exercise. So if anyone's familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals, they're a global set of 19 sustainability areas, if you like, environmental, social, governance, so it is the broadest suite. I think it's responsible consumption's one of them, energy and so on. What we would say to any organisation is have a look at the 17 and then shortlist to maybe the 3 or 4 that are most relevant to your organisation and where you feel you can have an impact relatively easily. Make that your priority for the next couple of years. Monitor, report, reflect on how it's going, and then after that couple of years you can go back to the SDGs and you can say, okay, we can now look at another 2. And I think it's it's trying to simplify it and, you know, make it achievable and meaningful for that business. I think the other thing, just to flag very quickly, in both of the areas that we've mentioned around defining your strategy, doing your audit, there's so much help available. There is free support that most organisations can tap into, whether it's the Green Skills boot camps that many of our universities are running at the moment, where you will get help putting your roadmap together. You can get someone in to come and do an audit for free for you, give you that recommendations report. There's grants available. The support out there at the moment is incredible. So this isn't something you have to do on your own. There is free expertise out there.
Actually, that's a really important thing, isn't it? So there is a lot of financial and government support in getting these things started. I mean, where do you actually, again, let's put this, the in the shoes of that mythical business from Smethwick. Never done this beforehand. Where do I start? You know, we've got to go green, okay?
Yeah, so what we would always say is, first of all, speak to an organisation called Business Growth West Midlands. So they are a central hub of information on business support across the piece. It's not just sustainability support, it's support on marketing, you know, whatever aspect of your business you need help with, they will be able to advise you on what is available. So speak to them and they will then direct you to all the various programmes that are out there. And given the topic that we're focusing on today, on circular economy, there's a couple of fantastic programmes. So one covering Birmingham and Solihull for businesses to get, you know, an audit of how they approach resource efficiency and circular economy. There's a more in-depth programme covering the whole of the West Midlands region, looking at specific materials like sand, metals, wastewater. And I could go on.
That granular, literally.
Yes, there's so much support out there. So, you know, for that business in Smethwick, don't sort of sit there thinking, oh my gosh, speak to somebody and I can guarantee you will get free help.
So, just out of curiosity, because I'm going to move on to questions now, but what support have you had?
We've actually received a lot of support. We've received a lot of support through the STEAMhouse. We received grant funding to help develop the technology several years ago, and also the company received the transformative technologies funding from Innovate UK. So we've received quite a lot of funding to support.
How well signposted are these things though, or is it you have to go and search these things out for yourself?
I think if you connect with an organisation, as I've said, I'm a part of STEAMhouse, then they'll be able to direct you. There'll always be a business advisor who can help. So I didn't actually find it that difficult. So what I would say to any small business is just connect with one of the organisations that are there to help, because there's help out there.
What about you, Al? I mean, to a certain extent, you're a large organisation. Is there support out there for you, or have you accessed it? Have you needed it?
Absolutely. I mean, we're so lucky to, we've actually, great to be introduced to a previous Selfridges sustainability member in the audience today. But where we have needed deeper expertise, we absolutely have been able to go out and get it. I think we see it slightly differently, whereby we know we're a large organisation, we know we're lucky to have fantastic brand reputation. And so we've been approaching this in a similar way that we would where we have where we've supported small designers, minority designers, UK-based designers on our kind of fashion side. We search and look and work with a lot of startups, particularly in the circular economy, traceability space, because we know we can lend them both our expertise, the backdrop of our commitments. I take her, who is a rental platform, as an example. We've been working with them since 2019 when they were, I mean, literally no one, and I believe that Selfridges really put them on the map and has really helped them to test and iterate. You know, you mentioned Innovate UK. We've gone in with an amazing AI startup as part of this year's Innovate UK AI grant. So we're really keen to lend our use cases, but also our name to really support fantastic entrepreneurs making a difference.
So you can actually go in there as a large organisation, as an advisor in your own right, as it were.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've been so lucky that we've worked with fantastic partners to get to where we are today, to test, to learn. So often it's not established businesses who are doing this. They are really small. There's definitely an element of risk there. But very fortunately, the experiences we've had to date have been fantastic, and it's been wonderful to see how far a lot of these businesses have come in the last kind of 5 years since we started working with them.
Right, I'm going to open to the audience. Any questions? Don't be shy, please. Oh, hang on. Oh, wow. Right, I'm going to go
Lots of
1, 2,
questions.
3. No, you, yes. You? Oh, I thought you put your hand up.
Yeah, me as well, yeah.
Yeah, you start. We'll go, bum. Tell us who you are. And
Debbie Ward from ASBP and Rebuild. Just a quick question for Ella around the supply chains and what metrics you're using from a circularity perspective. Sort of looking, obviously, cradle to cradle, because some you might say circular because of the materials that are using to make it, others might be circular because of it's a rental model. Just be interested to find out what metrics you're using to say what is circular and what isn't.
Absolutely. So at the moment, what we're focusing on is resale, repair, rental, refill, and recycle. We have a number of other ones that we haven't yet started around donate, etc. The reason for not going to donate is we haven't found a partner that we trust enough from a full end-of-life waste avoidance perspective. But the metrics are very much around keeping something in use for longer. Rental is a really interesting example at the moment where you're seeing, if you think about rental, the whole point for me is around increasing the wear and the longevity of that item. Rental, if I think about the UK players, is very events focused, and so we look at the utilisation of those items to see how much they're all being rented. Do we think that is exceeding what you would kind of think of as your average? From my perspective, the jury's kind of still out there. You really have to make sure the buy is right for it to really be considered circular. I also see a lot of the rental players pitching rental as a customer acquisition tool. So in terms of someone would rent your item and then they're going to go and buy it. And so from an LCA perspective, there is some data out there, but it's like with everything, it is a really murky area. LCAs are still pretty generic. Sorry, life cycle assessment. So that is a full kind of environmental impact of an item. So we work with a number of partners to look at life cycle assessments in terms of reduction. Our materials commitments is another interesting example where we work with third parties on certifications, and originally that was very much pitched around carbon reduction. We're currently doing a piece of work to look slightly broader at certifications that we don't include, with a wider focus on the sustainability, UN's SDGs, to think about biodiversity, water, and it's really hard because there isn't typically a globally accepted definition of what is more sustainable. I think increasingly, to your point around partnerships, there are amazing bodies and people trying to come together to align on what that might mean. We by no means think that we should be the authority on what is more sustainable. I'm very fortunate to have things like the Green Claims Code and the CMA and all these amazing bodies now really getting involved and saying and cracking down on a lot of those claims and trying to standardise and really welcome that standardisation.
Okay. Lady.
Thank you. I'm Beata from Wordsmith. I have a question to Ella again. It's so interesting.
No, you have to ask all three of them.
Yeah,
Sorry.
ask all of us.
You will be the person who will know the future more than. So this new story about circularity in a big department store like Selfridges. Will the sort of department store of the future, in your view, look differently, or will you then rather work with partners who are sitting next door, or will this be very, very different consumer experience?
Yeah, I think it will. And again, really energised to look at other department stores making really similar steps. I talk about France a lot. I think the French are really leading the way in terms of circular economy. AGEC is a piece of legislation that is probably one of the most stringent out there. But your Galeries Lafayette, your Printemps, those big department stores there are increasingly giving over space to pre-loved items. But again, I think our department store in the future will be probably much more experiential, much more service-led. You will probably engage with it virtually in a non-physical way. I think it will look very, very different. Ultimately, we are going to have to move away from just new stuff, and so how we create a new environment around that, I think, will be fascinating.
I'm going to extend the question quickly. So, Anna, I mean, can I look at manufacturers for a moment? I mean, I talked about the way we're going to see perhaps greater, I use the word partnership in its loosest terms, people in the department stores and perhaps the wider footprints. What about perhaps, say, with manufacturers? Are we seeing a move away from perhaps traditional supply chains to more supply webs, as it were, where they're working through sustainability more in partnership?
Yes, I mean, you have to have those relationships with your whole supply chain to make a circular economy model work, because you're looking at remanufacture, you're looking at repurposing. You know, there's lots of different steps to truly, you know, reintegrating materials back into products and services, and you can't do that on your own. You have got to do it with other businesses. So yeah, those partnerships are really important. And again, there's various networks out there that can support
Such
with
as,
that. So we've got Circular Economy Club, which has various different branches. We've got one in Birmingham. Debbie's heavily involved with that, if anyone wants to find out more. There's other networks as well, whether they're sector-specific, cross-sector, but again, it's around those relationships. Now, one of our members, they're called International Synergies. They've been around for a long time. Their entire focus is on working with businesses to identify useful outlets for their byproducts. It's called industrial symbiosis. So one person's byproduct or waste can go into another business as a really valuable material, and they act as that broker, if you like. So it's a proven model.
So, but basically, someone said, "Well, I've got no use for this. Would anybody like it?"
Of
I'm not
course.
knocking it. It's
Yeah, and there's value in that. You know, you can make hundreds and thousands of pounds from stuff that perhaps at one point in time went into the bin or maybe recycling. If you're then adding that as a, you know, a material into someone else's process, you can make some money from
It's
it.
like, well, what was that one? Was it the early example of that is Marmite, you know, from beer. What we're going to do with this? Okay, we can flog it.
Yeah, yeah.
What about you? What about you? Sorry, how does it work with you in terms of, in the sense of, with your customers? I know your clients, they're coming to you, but in terms of you're no longer seen as part of a supply chain, but more of a supply web, as it were, feeding ideas in. Does that affect you at all? I know I'm saying rather vague, but you can see where I'm coming from.
Yeah. Sorry, can you just...
So I'm wittering, I'll be bluntly honest. Tell you what, let's take another question rather than me flog this one.
Sure, thank you. Hi, I'm Milena, I'm from TechUK. But I found very interesting the conversation around culture shift and mindset, and we heard a few specific examples, and that's great, but I was wondering if you were to scale that up, so if you were to address a larger audience and, you know, really kind of transmit this like sense of urgency, but also the value that adopting a mindset shift when it comes to sustainability and circular economy. What do you think are the best or most effective ways to address this kind of like larger scale audience from the experiences you've had, or like how would you kind of scale that up to address a large?
Who wants to take that one?
Do you mean within a large business or within, you know, a global audience?
Yeah, more of a global kind of audience from that, in that sense, or like national or global.
I think if I take just retail as an example, I appreciate that it's quite specific, but I think what's been shown is telling customers that the world is on fire, but we're still buying shoes, to quote the amazing book by Alec Leach, doesn't work. Guilt tripping them, judging them, making them feel bad it just does not resonate. The motivations, you know, people want to buy stuff, they're addicted to the dopamine hit, they want to feel good, they want to look good, and in every single piece of customer research that we've done, or, you know, anybody else, big consultancies have done, in terms of it being a motivation, sustainability typically lands fourth, if not fifth, in why a customer is buying something. And so actually tapping into the motivation of they want the brand or they want it to be a fantastic product. Price point is really, really key. You know, secondhand is great for all of those things. You can get rare, unique pieces no one else is going to have, from fantastic brands at a cheaper price point. So you think about cost of living crisis, there's so many reasons that you can like tap that in. And for Selfridges, what we've also really learned is they want circular to feel luxurious. They want it to feel as elevated, as special, as fun, as dynamic, as if they were coming into us to buy something shiny and brand new. And so that's where we're actually really doubling down this year on how we rebrand sustainability within our ecosystem. And hopefully that will amplify out, that customers will, they'll want to adopt it, yes, because it is better, but that's very much not the message that we'll be leading with.
Okay, right. I'm aware of time, so I'm going to speak
Can I
after this.
just
But
quickly mention
oh, please, yes.
No, I'd just like to say that I attend a lot of conferences globally. And when you talk about a wider audience, what I've actually found is different countries actually see things differently and have different understandings on how far we are. Like, for example, I was at a conference in Milan, and there was a company there that was recycling. It was like denim jackets, and they'd created a large machine whereby it used magnets. So when the jacket went through this recycling machine, the buttons went one way, the textiles went another way, and it was quite a quick process. But then when I went to another conference and I actually mentioned this, I won't mention where, but they were completely oblivious, and they were like, oh, no, whatever happens in academia takes a long time to filter into industry. And they didn't realise that it was already being done in industry. So I think a lot of networking and a lot of reaching out globally to find out what others are doing would be very advantageous.
So there's a lot to be said. I hate to say
Yeah.
it, but sitting down in an evening, glass of wine, and just surfing the web for a while, and coming up with ideas. I'm not knocking it. It's but we're actually researching.
Definitely, yeah.
Right. What I'm going to do then is quickly go. If I start with you, Carla, a parting thought, perhaps a prediction, a plea, a recommendation, a warning, a cry from the heart, whatever it is that you feel. If there's one thing you'd like the people here this morning to take away.
Connect and ask for help. You know, connect with your local university, connect with your business support organisation, connect with funders, connect with people on your retail park or your industrial estate, because you will absolutely benefit from it.
Just to go and knock on the people next door and have a chat.
Have a conversation, because you will probably find some commonality, something you can learn from, potentially some materials that you can exchange.
Okay. Ella, what takeaway thoughts?
Yeah, mine would be, I think it's all very well wanting to keep things in the loop and moving to circular models and services, but ultimately that is a drop in the ocean if we don't think and address consumption. So, and I think we can all have such a big impact within ourselves, our own networks, our own communities on changing those behaviours. And so swapping, sharing, renting, buying less, really thinking about that cost per wear, etc. That would be my one.
Okay. And so you take away thought from you.
The world basically has changed, and regarding, because I'm in textiles, the manufacturing process has stayed the same for traditional textiles for, since it was conceived basically. So I think that we are moving away from the large manufacturing, the fast fashion. So as it's been mentioned, having quality clothing, quality yarns, etc., that will then automatically stay within the life cycle longer. And I think that's definitely the way in which we're going. So just to, focus on buying less of but higher quality, I think definitely is the way.
So the important of is associating sustainability with quality rather than sort of...
Yes, definitely. Than just fast fashion.
Right, okay then. I think that's it. So, if nothing else, can you give a round of applause for our panel, please? I understand we have some closing fireside chat with Sarah King.
Oh. Okay.
I'm going to be your mic person for the questions, Sarah.
Oh,
so
okay,
you look
magical.
towards me when there are any questions, and I'll
Okay, perfect.
point hands with the microphone.
Okay, perfect.
So don't feel worried.
Okay, perfect. So I'm just here to tell you a little bit about what I do at STEAMhouse, how it connects to circularity and sustainability, and I guess just give you a bit of an insight into the world of biomaterials as a new and emerging space within kind of biodesign and the wider creative industry. So the images you'll see on screen are from a pop-up event that happened a few weeks ago now, which were all around scoping the possibility of new materials within the urban landscape. So as STEAMhouse, as BCU, we brand ourselves as the university for the city, and what that means in terms of my work is looking at circularity and waste as an opportunity for us to build and develop new opportunities within the city that look at things like regeneration, look at new business opportunity, look at innovation, and support cultural change to look at actually what does a sustainable city really look like. And I know the Sustainable Development Goals were mentioned. It taps really deeply into a lot of those core kind of principles around justice, education, consumption, all of these big topics that we talk about, but actually there's opportunity on a really granular level to look at what we can do as individuals, as small businesses, as institutions, on how we support the city and what we do to engage and develop that work. So biodesign, biomaterials, and this whole culture of kind of creative ambition around sustainability has been led through, I guess, what is effectively a really limited opportunity for what's out there in terms of product and service development for the creative sector as a whole. And when we think about the creative sector and then how we engage with it on a daily basis, it effectively makes up the spaces around us. So as we sit in this room, the chairs we're sat on, the table in front of me, the carpets, the walls, everything has been designed, has been created, and that means that someone has chosen the materials they've used, they've looked at functionally how it's going to work, the lifespan, how comfortable it is, the aesthetic. And actually, as a creative industry for a long time now, we've been looking at, okay, well, what's better? What can we use that's different, that provides us opportunities for sustainable choices? And actually, there's just not very much out there. And so this concept of biodesign and this kind of new industry that's emerged is the response to that limitation. And it's a space where creatives have taken it upon themselves to start thinking about, well, how do we design the materials that we then take and put into the tables, the chairs, the sofas, the floors that we design and create and put out into the world, so that we can say we've made better choices and we've come up with circular, sustainable and regenerative options for the industry. And why it fits so nicely in with STEAMhouse is that it is really it's STEAM all over in terms of how the industry has had to move forward. So it's been branded kind of biotechnology, which originally is very much a healthcare sector industry, but actually this new idea of biotechnology looks to work with scientists, engineers, manufacturers, so all of the STEM subjects in combination with the arts and creative outputs, and in so many ways is being driven by that space. And what we do here at STEAMhouse is look to incorporate that mix of expertise, but within a space where they're able to get hands-on, to produce prototypes, to develop outputs, to look at how we can manufacture, but also to look at the strategies around it and how you then embed those within businesses that are profitable, are sustainable, create the right impact for a city and then on a more global scale as well. So my role within STEAMhouse is primarily looking at product support, so looking at maybe the very granular and technical approaches to biodesign as an industry and how you might utilise waste resources such as coffee grounds or eggshells It might be sawdust, so thinking about more industrial symbiosis mechanisms, larger scale waste resources and how you might utilise those. I've even worked on projects that look at working with cow poo, for example, as a waste resource that can be bedded into various different products and materials that can be used across industries. So I have worked on projects that look to embed sawdust as a hard surface material for insulation and other hard surface applications in architecture. I've looked at alternative plastics made from agar for possible packaging alternatives. I've looked at bacterial cellulose and the idea of growing materials to be used as alternative leather resources. So all of these ideas are taking things that are either a waste stream, usually very abundant stuff that you can identify around you, but then also potentially looking at how you utilise them to make a new material manufactured in the same way that a lot of our standard materials are, but thinking about that life cycle analysis and how you consider things like transport, energy, consumption, all of these different areas to think about the credentials, the sustainable credentials of a material, but also thinking about the culture shift and how looking at alternative materials, so looking at things like coffee ground, we probably all drink at least one coffee every day and we never even think about what happens to that waste, never mind the paper cup, but actually that resource that you can't even imagine the amount of waste coffee that Birmingham produces in a day. But actually when you start thinking about that and all of a sudden, well, hang on a minute, so that work surface over there that I could buy for my kitchen is made out of waste coffee grounds, it really starts to shift your perspective on what materials are, but also what waste is and what resource looks like. And so a lot of the work I do, in addition to supporting businesses to think about new products and systems for their work, is education and culture change, what was being talked about in the panel. This idea of actually let's look at business as usual, how we live now, the linear system, and circularity plays a perfect role to disrupt it and think about what are the alternatives, which also provides amazing spaces for innovation, which is where STEAMhouse and my work comes in to support the startups, the creatives that maybe don't have the financial resource or the expertise needed to develop products that really can make a difference across Birmingham and then much further afield as well. So that's a really, really quick overview of what I do at STEAMhouse and my role. And I don't know if anyone has any questions at all that they would like to ask.
The mic is very intimidating. Thanks so much. That sounds so interesting. I think obviously you're at the point where you're coming up with those ideas and thinking about how we can do things differently. In terms of how we then implement that and a bit more what the panel were talking about kind of further down the line, what do you see as the biggest challenges from taking the ideas that you guys are coming up with to actually implementing them into industry?
Yeah, so there are a lot of barriers, I guess, because it's still a very new and emerging industry. There's no real I guess as a sector, there's no real kind of spearhead, so there's not necessarily someone at the top of the tree who's looking at the agenda for how these innovations are developed. So, you know, technically any new innovation is going to take maybe 8 to 10 years to bring into fruition, especially if it's something physical, because you have things like testing, health and safety, and then things like funding that make it really challenging to take these next steps. But there are various different models now that have showed the opportunity for these new materials. Some have been funded through things like Innovate UK to take them through the process of developing the kind of sustained prototypes that can then go out into the market. What tends to happen is that they'll go out into the market for kind of luxury markets, so looking at supply chains that are much more expensive because actually they can make the return and it has opportunity there, with the hope that as demand grows they can lower their prices and eventually it's something that trickles down into lower markets. And then there are also consortiums of private companies that have invested in some of these new technologies, which one gives them a bit of an edge. So again, what was talked about in the panel in terms of, you know, we want to be seen to doing the best thing, this really good thing. So there are consortiums investing in doing that, which means they hold that technology, and then the hope is at some point that technology is then available to the wider market as well. So it starts to trickle down in that respect. But there is definitely progress. For example, Innovate UK have looked at kind of circular funding and sustainable grants specifically for bio-based materials over the last few years. So the progress is there, and it's just more of that support and more kind of legislation to encourage businesses to seek out this stuff, because as the demand continues to grow, the support will, follow, I think. Yeah, go for it.
Going back to the funding, I have a question as well.
Yeah.
I mean, the angel funders, and I know there's a lot of interest in investing, and I mean, how can this be improved? That kind of these investors are seeing you, and yeah.
Yeah, I think it's that storytelling piece. So really, I think really helping businesses to understand the value that they're offering. And actually, I think now we're seeing, in terms of investment, the strategy is changing, and long-term investment really moving forward is the way that people will be looking to expand their portfolio in the future. And so looking at sustainability and presenting a long-term investment strategy for those kind of funders, I think that's where we need to sit. And some of that is around non-creatives needing support with business, and developing that plan, that strategy, so it looks as exciting an opportunity as it can do for investment. But it is that storytelling piece. The businesses that have that maybe started about 10 years ago that are now in a position where they've most of which have achieved large amounts of funding, have done it through a really concise process of communicating the very core value of what it is they're doing, and they've focused on one particular industry as well, so as not to kind of muddle the waters a little bit. So it is that storytelling marketing piece, I think, that will help to translate. Sure. Go for it, Anna.
So the work on biomaterials sounds fantastic, but I always feel quite nervous about the sort of end of life, which inevitably does come. And some materials that, they're sort of badged as, this is great because it's compostable.
Yes.
Well, you can't compost them at home,
Yeah.
and sometimes you can't even compost them at an industrial scale. So are you working with waste processors, and is that an area of focus for you as well?
Yeah, so it's actually really interesting, because working with waste process it can be very limiting at the moment, because they themselves are still in a space where they're trying to understand the new market, and there isn't maybe enough of particular waste coming in for them to invest in technologies to be able to process them in the right ways. So I think there's an interesting space where, again, there's opportunity for new business to look at how we either start to process waste that's coming through from places like the bioeconomy and things like that. But then also a lot of companies, especially larger companies that are really kind of forward thinking in this area, are putting in place their own resources to look at how they completely circulate those materials within their own organisation, which from what I've seen so far seems to be a more beneficial model for the business in terms of finances, but also really what the effectiveness of those raw materials when they come into the process, because what they can then do is design with the waste that they've produced to either put it back into the system as a new product of similar standard, or those very technical processes around waste depreciation are done in-house in the right way. Again, though, challenges of funding and investment in these technologies are always there, and I think the larger organisations who have money to invest are the ones that are kind of they're really kind of pushing forward in this area. But it's interesting, because I was talking to an architect the other day about how the kind of the demolition model is changing, and actually there's an opportunity in the future, say 30 years time, for there to be a really big business around the demolition of waste, and all of a sudden something that is a real hassle now, it's like, oh, okay, we just need to just get rid of this building. It's a pain, let's start fresh soon. And I think now legislation is coming in where you have to look at the usable parts of that building before you demolish. And actually in 20, 30 years time, we could be in a place where people are fighting to take the resources from that building before new is made of it, because actually waste will become very valuable. And so that idea of, things going to landfill may not even be a thing, or at least that's the hope.
Starting to happen with steel already.
Yeah, exactly. And so we're finding new value propositions for things that we just observe as rubbish, which is really, really exciting, and that needs to carry through into every sector, really. Yeah, they're really forward thinking. Same with kind of bio-design and materials made from kind of natural and organic timbers, things like that. Yeah. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so I'm a carpenter, a joiner.
Yeah.
And I try to use sustainability in my practice. I do, I try to recycle as much wood as I can, etc., etc.
Yeah.
What you were saying about the coffee tops, the kitchen counters made of coffee grounds.
Yeah.
Sounds fascinating.
Yeah.
At the minute, I would have no idea this exists, so I wouldn't be able to offer it to potential clients.
Yeah.
Or these materials, I have this alternative.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering where I would find this stuff, so I could maybe tell colleagues, look, we could use something different. This. Is there a portal, journals, magazines?
So there are loads of different resources online. What I would say is a lot of these startups are still in early stage, so they're probably not at the point where they could say to you, yeah, we can supply you a worktop, no problem. But there are more established businesses, and definitely locally as well. So I actually have some samples downstairs that I can show you for businesses that are already working this way with waste materials specifically for your sector. But online they're more global in terms of resources that you can access that look some at kind of very advanced, very forward-thinking material exploration. Some are, I guess, more of a bank of resources. So things like Material District are an online platform for new material developments, and it's for various different stages of businesses, but you'll find businesses that can supply large quantity. You'll also find businesses that will only do bespoke one-off. But the resources are online, and I mean, if you want to have a chat after, I can definitely share a few more with you. Yeah.
Sophia from STEAMhouse. Yeah, I absolutely adore your work. But I'm just thinking, we talk about businesses and educating them, but I'm also thinking about how do we kind of educate the young people as well, because if we can start them off early, it will have a bigger impact and they can start thinking more creatively going forward.
Yeah, and I think that's a really, really good point. So I do some work with students across various different creative courses of the university, and a lot of what we do is a very, very experimental introduction to biomaterials, which goes back to that idea of kind of culture shift. So giving them an opportunity to, one, understand the materials that they're specifying at the moment. So when they're thinking about projects and they're specifying, say, a PET plastic, making sure they understand what that is really important, which actually a lot of the time people don't necessarily know. Same with textiles, really making sure people understand that, the difference between natural and synthetic, and then within that, what are the complexities of the fibres already on the market. So doing that work, but trying to do it in something that's hands-on and creative, I find is less... it's just less challenging and more engaging for young people, because like the panel was saying, we don't want to be told we're doing it wrong. That gets people's backs up straight away, and then actually your capacity to learn and explore is kind of shut down almost immediately. So doing it from a space of being quite creative, quite explorative, I've found to be a much better approach for some of these quite challenging topics when you kind of get down into it. And for a lot of these students going out into the industry,
it hasn't quite changed yet. So they might be going out kind of thinking about things with quite a blue sky approach, and actually the realities are still quite tricky out there. So giving them that optimism and excitement around it whilst they're kind of learning their craft, I think is really important. And it will ultimately feed into the industry in years to come, which is what's so exciting. You know, they will be part of the change as well. Okay, I think that's me out of the hot seat. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you to all of our panellists and to the person that got to sit in the hot seat. I hope everybody found that really informative. And it's, again, it's been a pleasure to have you here at STEAMhouse. If anybody, I'm going to sort of look at Sarah now and peek dearly into her eyes. If anybody would like a tour of the space or any of our spaces downstairs, perhaps Sarah, certainly your space, because it's got most potential to what we were talking about today, please just hang around and we can do that for you. So thank you very much. Thanks to everybody again, and thank you for coming to STEAMhouse.